Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfisherinsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Today our guest is Russ Miller. Russ is the marketing director of Umpqua Feather Merchants. Russ helps to continue to drive the brand Umpqua as a recognized fly fishing icon amongst the industry. Umpqua has deep roots with many years of supplying fly fishers with what many describe as the world's best quality flies, leaders, and tippets. Here today to tell us more about this is Russ Miller. Russ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Super excited that you could find some time in your schedule to talk to us. So why don't we jump right into it? And before we talk about the business, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Russ?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a fly fishing addict is the best way to sum it up.
That's good.
At this point, I don't know what I do outside of fly fishing. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of different angles of it. I've guided. I've worked at a fly shop just down the road from Umpqua, actually, Front Range Anglers in Boulder. And that's where I really kind of learned the industry side of things. And after that, I started on the manufacturing side working for Sage Fly Fish. I have jumped over to Umpqua Feather Merchants. So really stayed core to a lot of the fly fishing, whether it be hard goods and now into the fly side of things. And I am totally immersed in that. I'm a big fly tyer myself. I'm a member of Fly Fishing Team USA on their traveling team and have been to 5 different world championships. So I'm, like I said, addicted is the best way I can describe it. Too far down the hole is another way to look at it. But yeah, in love with the sport, in love with the stories, and really loving my early time here at Umpqua. I'm still the new guy, although no one calls me the FNG at the office. I definitely have that vibe. But yeah, getting to play with flies and getting to understand the history, and one of the things that gets me so excited about Umpqua is the fact that really the modern history of fly fishing can be told through flies. And many of those flies are in the Umpqua catalog. And so it's super cool to get on the phone and talk with some of these tyers and anglers that I've looked up to and looked at for inspiration, and get to chat with them a little bit, pick their brain, and it continues to push me further down into the darkness.
Awesome. I love it. I want to touch base on, so hearing that intro or hearing a bit about your past, it sounds like you started at the bottom and kind of worked your way up to the top. So when did you exactly come over to Umpqua, and what did you do? Like you started in the fly shops, and then did you get right away into the role that you're currently at Umpqua?
Oh, that's a great question. I started guiding in college. The fly shop, I was the kid that kept coming in almost every day, and I was just here, I was just there, I need this, I need that. And eventually they were like, have you ever thought about taking people out fishing? And I hadn't. I was in the consumptive angling mode of my life where I couldn't catch enough fish to satisfy myself. And the thought of having to hold a rod and tell someone where to catch the fish was very difficult for me to swallow. But being a college kid, it looked like great money. And I started taking people out to all my favorite spots and kind of sharing some of my passion. And from there, I finished school. I did the trout bum, ski bum thing for a while, which was fabulous. It was great. Kind of met my wife, my soon-to-be wife, in that point in my life, and we needed to get a little more serious, so I got a job at the fly shop. I had a background in fine art and web design, and so they were wanting to redo their website, so they brought me on to bring that to be. And so that's how I got going in the fly shop world. And then, doors kept opening as I kept looking. So we moved up to Seattle 7 years ago. And then I started working for Sage at their factory in their pro sales department. So I was their pro desk. So I got to deal with all the kind of the guides and outfitters and various ambassadors, which again, you talk about just fueling someone's passion for the sport, getting to talk to other really, really skilled anglers and pick their brain on how they do things and why. was a real treat for me. And eventually someone said that made more sense to be in the marketing department than the sales department. And so I got pushed into marketing, which is very much what I had been doing all along, but not formally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, so that's really what got me started in marketing. And then my wife and I got married here in Estes Park. The rain, we had our son up in Seattle, and the rain really got to my wife. And she was like, I'm done with the rain. When you have to like wipe down a slide for your kid to go down it at the park.
Twice in a minute, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's just a lot. So, but yeah, I mean, that was incredible, my time up there. I really learned about the two-handed rod, steelhead, the history of the two-handed revolution that took place there with, really the Skagit River and the Sauk River as the backdrop. But yeah, so we came back to Colorado, and after about a year and a half, I started with Umpqua.
So, Russ, I guess it's safe to say that you made some great relationships and friendships when you were working at Sage, and no doubt that with the pro staff, and no doubt that transpired, or you brought that over with you as the marketing director currently with Umpqua, is what you're doing now. Is that correct?
Correct.
So describe to us what your role is at Umpqua and exactly what you do on a daily basis in a sped up version.
Yeah, I try to keep my head facing the right direction. We've got a lot of projects at the moment. I stepped in at what I would consider a busy time. We've got new product that's going to be that our retailers are seeing currently, that consumers will be seeing here shortly. So we're launching new product, which is really exciting. We produce a 400-page catalog of our flies and other categories. So that's going to print in about a month. And we're in the process of launching a new website. So my day is pretty filled up, and really trying to build new relationships with a lot of our signature tires and Umpqua family. Like I said, I try to keep my head on straight.
I'm not surprised. You're a busy guy, and I know we've had to tie you down there. So before we talk a bit more about what you're currently doing, I want to look back at the past. The brand has over 45 years now it's been in business. That's a long time for any business, particularly in the fly fishing business. Is one of the longest brands. So can you tell me about how the company got started, or where their focus was when they were getting started, and has it shifted throughout the years, or has it always maintained the same?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. We're 47 years young, just as excited about flies and fly fishing as when the company started. Yeah, the direction, I would say the single focus of Umpqua, and I'll get into the history here in a moment, it's an amazing story. And I get to hear it through we've got a lot of these legacy tires that have been with the brand since it really started. And I get to hear these stories directly from them, and they are also varied, and I can't wait to share some of them with you guys. But the main focus since Umpqua started in its inception was the highest quality flies available. And that hasn't changed for us. We're still trying to deliver and develop the highest quality flies possible. We're the exclusive users of these of 5 different factories overseas. The tires that are there are the most skilled tires that I think exist on planet Earth. If you look at how the kind of factories all play out, you've got our factories at the center, and then you've got these, secondary factories all around it. We train our tires at a level that really allows them to go to other places. But we provide such great environment to tie in that our tires typically don't leave. So we've got very, very highly skilled tires that really make each one of these flies by hand. It's unreal. I have a video I'd love to be able to share with you. I think people's jaws would drop. A copper john, which many anglers are familiar, and if you're not familiar with it, you ought to be. It's an incredible fish catching fly. But our tires overseas can produce that fly in a minute, 10 seconds. So unbelievably fast, unbelievably high quality. And so and that hasn't shifted one bit since we were founded back in 1970. And I'm happy to dive into the history. We'll take a deep breath and then we'll go back in time. So let's go back to 1970 when Umpqua started.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we're in Southern Oregon. Oregon's a pretty crunchy place. Back in the 70s, it was a really crunchy crunchy place. And Dennis Black was the founder of Umpqua Flies. And he was known as the feather merchant. He was the guy that was really running around finding exotic materials to tie flies with, a very social person and an incredibly business savvy person. And the way fly fishing was working back then is that you had a lot of these fly shops were getting their flies from regional tires. So you had production tires, kind of like we're seeing coming back today a little bit with Instagram has allowed this again, right? Where you've got, really small scale production that's not really scalable outside of like supplying one fly shop's needs or maybe two, right? So
exactly, yeah.
You're the town's local tire and you're, whipping up stuff that's regionally very appropriate.
Yeah.
Dennis had this idea that he wanted to bring those regional patterns to fly shops across the country. He's like, this is a fish catching fly here, there, and way over there. And he says, we're not doing the angling community a service by just having these exist in one shop. And at the time, flies that were produced overseas, were notorious for being unbelievably cheap, right? And so there was this huge quality difference between what was being delivered to the fly shops from these small regional tires and what was being delivered to the masses, right? And, flies that would fall apart, flies that look nothing like what they should have looked like.
Cheaper materials. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, how cheap and how many can we produce? Yep. And so Dennis was like, man, that's not how we're going to do it. It's never going to work if that's what it looks like. And all of the tires knew it. So they had the reputation of producing these unbelievably high quality flies that were their signature patterns. And so, the thought of it being this cheap overseas production fly was terrifying to most anglers. So Dennis had to really go out on a limb and sell this idea to people. One of the first people he sold that idea to was Dave Whitlock.
Okay.
And Randall Kaufman was a part of this, and Mike Lawson. And so he really sold this idea of hey guys, we're gonna do things different. We're gonna go overseas and develop this. And again, so he got these guys to commit, and they're like, all right, this is crazy. You seem ultra passionate and focused on it. I'm in. And he set up a royalty program, right? So there was an incentive for these guys to kind of give away these secrets that they kept buried behind their vest pockets and hand it over, right? I can make potentially as much money having you sell them as me doing it myself, and I don't have to tie anymore. I can just create. So that was the basic premise. And then I think the catalyst story is pretty ridiculous. Dennis, reading the paper one morning in Oregon, reads in the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. is looking for new business opportunities overseas and in India and China specifically. And so Dennis sends a letter to the U.S. government saying, I've got an idea.
What year is this? Sorry, what year is this?
This would be 68, 69, right in there.
Wow, okay.
And so the U.S. government gave him a grant to go over and start Umpqua Feather Merchants. Without that initial check, right? Dennis is still, kind of a barefooted hippie living in Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
With an incredible idea. So that was the catalyst that took him over to India. He lived over there. He trained tires. And then, that was our initial run. I was just looking through a catalog that we had from 1973, which is totally trippy. We have a completely different logo. Yeah, there's photos of it. We couldn't use it today. There's photos of chickens being beheaded, right? And then the feathers being taken to be processed to tie flies with. Very, very cool stuff.
Times were different back then, but that's such a cool story. 1968, this is happening. And he's over in India training people. How fascinating is that? So.
And this is where the investment, he knew he had to invest the time into training tires because they couldn't be trusted to go and just do because the result would be the exact same as what we had been seeing. Mm-hmm. And this is what he was trying to really fight against. So put in the time to really train people and understand, you're trying to sell people on a fly that have no idea what fly fishing is, why people would do this, And so he really had to, sit there and walk them through processes and understand it. And the other thing that was a really big deal at the time was during Dennis's travels. He was a big traveler over to Japan. He got linked up with the folks at Tiemco and producing the highest quality steel available too. So, right, he had these factories that were able to produce flies, and then he had this hook that was unbelievable. If you go back in time, and maybe you remember, but when you used to sit down at your vise to tie a fly, you would often have to sharpen your point with step one.
That's right?
Yeah. It wasn't laying on the base. And now we have these chemically sharpened hooks that are going on to production flies. So it was, it was kind of a 1-2 punch and really introduction to the right people.
Crazy. Very fascinating. Russ, I want to ask you, I know you weren't there, but what were some of the early day struggles that you could think of that would transpire, what we would be aware of right now?
Well, yeah. The original birthplace of Umpqua, after a few years, they shifted up into the Umpqua Valley to the town of Glide. And so they're right on the banks of the Umpqua River. We had a lot of passionate steelheaders at the time. The problem was you were in Glide, Oregon, and it's the middle of nowhere. And it's a humid place. It rains a lot. And the old Umpqua offices really looked kind of like a compound, I think is the best way I've heard it described. And I've seen photos of it. It's very farmhouse, big steel sheds, and when you had to pick an order, oftentimes you were walking around to different sheds based on what you needed. So materials were in one, bulk flies were in another, you had other materials in another shed. So you're walking this order around outside in the elements in Oregon getting poured on. And as you might imagine, Glide, Oregon doesn't have quite as diverse of a workforce as a town like Denver or Lafayette, where we currently are. And so you ran into troubles there too. And you're fighting against the time. I mean, you're talking about passionate anglers with an idea and a good sense of business, but not necessarily businessmen. And so yeah, you're up against the lot, and you're really trying to change the way people perceive offshore flies.
Exactly. No, I see your challenges. I see the challenges that were faced. I'm assuming there was a high turnover in work, trying to get people to come up there, selling someone on the idea to come and work for you when it's in the middle of nowhere, and it was a different time back then as well. So
totally. I listen to these stories, and then you hear it from you hear it from some of the original signature tires that were out there trying to sell the idea, making it work too. And really truly hustlers in the game. I mean, they're road tripping across the country with materials, with flies, hitting shops, hitting rivers. And I mean, I feel like some of these stories you would see in a rock and roll history, like the band touring the country and the evening activity. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that it worked. It's amazing the stories. And it's amazing how it has stuck around for almost 50 years because you hear some of these early stories, and I mean they were rock and roll anglers. I don't know how else to put it. It's hilarious.
They were, in a sense, they absolutely were. But I think, in my opinion, one of the reasons why it stuck around for so many years is because you had a good product, right? At the end of the day, if the product was good, people are going to continue to buy it, buy into the product, right? So.
Absolutely. You have these regional tires that, like Mike Lawson on the Henry's Fork. Mike carried his own clout. I mean, like Lefty Cray, Larry Dahlberg. I mean, it was really like Dennis gathered the who's who of fly fishing and fly tying and brought them into the family. And that's a lot of why it worked right there, was just the right people involved. And they're the ones that are out there kind of like promoting the sport and making the sport approachable, digestible, and here are the flies you need, and you can get them from Umpqua.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's a lot of why it worked, and and those guys aren't going to put their name next to a product that's not to their standards, right? If you've ever seen like the no hackle flies from Mike Lawson, they're these unbelievably gorgeous flies that are free of hackle that have these feather wings that just turn up to the sides ever so gently, and while they look unbelievably simplistic and ultra realistic, they are insanely difficult to tie. And to have a pattern like that produced in mass quantities that Mike doesn't have to sit there and tie himself, or train an assistant kind of to apprentice under him. And in a good day, you can turn out a couple dozen, maybe even a few dozen. To have that just ready to I'll take 12 dozen size 18s today. It was a game changer. It brought that fly to places like, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, the East Coast. I mean, which is super cool.
Definitely cool. You know what, Russ, I do want to shift to today. So like in today's time, what's the current brand's focus? Yeah, I know you mentioned that you have some newer products, newer technologies, and all that sort of stuff. What are you currently focused on, or is it still going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We're focused on really fly fishing, and the flies are an essential part of that. Through flies, we've introduced new categories. So we have leader and tippet. Umpqua launched the first extruded tapered leader the same year as Orvis did. Which, so we've been in the leader game a really long time. And the reason we got into leader and tippet was because really and this isn't the case anymore, but it really needs to be the case for many anglers. The tippet size dictated what kind of presentation your fly was going to have, right? So if you've got a really stiff material and you're trying to fish small, dainty flies that you want to naturally wave in the currents, you end up reducing the effectiveness of that fly because the presentation is so off for the intended purpose, right? That we got in there and said, we've got steelhead strength with Spring Creek subtle. And really, it's a lot of the same what we're trying to do today. We're trying to deliver the maximum amount of strength in a tippet material in the appropriate diameters, right? So you can get great movement out of a size 24 in the middle of January on one of our Colorado tailwaters. Or if you're trying to really deliver big foamy hoppers, you've got on 2 or 3X, you've got a stout material that's going to turn that over. So we're really trying to have the right presentation and then the strength there to land those fish. So on that 6 or 7X in the middle of January, you got to be, hooking them's one thing, landing them's another.
Yeah, always is.
Totally. So yeah, we entered into leaders, and then from we've always done fly tying material and Metz and Tiemco on the feather and hook side. We've had a lot of different materials kind of come and go that have been unique to Umpqua, that have been materials that are readily available. We found on the material side we ended up kind of robbing ourselves of materials we needed to do production flies when they were sitting on our shelves waiting to be sold. And so we've kind of gotten away from a lot of the materials and let the Wapsies and the Hairlines of the world handle that, while still maintaining super high quality genetic feathers from Metz.
Okay.
And more recently, we've gotten into fly boxes, right? We want to provide great storage for all the flies that we offer. And that's turned into packs, right? So we wanted to give you a great place to put your boxes. So it's really all stemming from the fly, all of our product category extensions. And flies remain at the heart of what we do at Umpqua.
So I want to actually talk about the packs, and it's funny that you brought that up because I see the progression now. But when I was looking at it, I'm like, how do they go from flies, leaders, and tippets straight up into packs? So can you tell us a bit about the packs, or where the packs and what they're focused on, and what your purpose is for the packs?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of anglers within the walls, and the packs really came twofold, right? Like wanting the right system for the different kind of angling that we all do. And the other one is, flies are a completely unbranded category and the biggest category for Umpqua. Oh, it would have been the early 70s. Dennis made the decision, and he fought for the decision, to not have an individual barcode put on the fly, because you have to list country of origin, right?
Yeah.
On anything imported. And the barcode would have listed country of origin, and he fought hard to have that be on the boxes that they're shipped in by the dozen, right? And so we don't have any branding on our largest category, the category that our company was founded on. Mm-hmm. And so the packs are also an opportunity for us to just kind of have some visibility on the angler, right? So they can say, the quality that's tied into each one of the Umpqua flies is still built into this pack, and they can wear the brand. But, the more importantly, the packs are loaded with features.
Yeah.
If you've never fished one or picked one up, I would encourage you to do so. One of the things you're going to notice right out of the gates is we've got something called Zero Sweep built into all of our packs. And zero sweep is a military term. We developed this in conjunction with ex-military. And what they do before they jump out of a plane is they do a sweep. And it means that there's nothing dangling from you that could potentially be, life-threatening in that situation. But for us as anglers, right, how many times have you been out on the stream and you've got that fish that's consistently rising and you're like, all right, I'm going to drop a long cast at him and make a presentation, and you go out there and everything's unrolling nicely, and then bam, your line jumps. Yeah, totally. And you look down, you're looped on your own hemos, you're looped on your nipper or your tippet or whatever. And all of a sudden it comes crashing down in a heap and the fish isn't rising anymore.
You bet. I've been there personally many times, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. It's awful. So that was the idea with our packs, is we wanted to come out with something where anglers, we believe in the zero sweep, and it's just nice. Like, all of our zipper pulls are closed. I mean, it's devils in the details when you start really looking at the amount of features that are built into an Umpqua pack.
I'm going to talk a bit more about the packs, but how many models do you currently have, or are you offering?
Yeah. We offer 2 waist packs, currently 3 sling packs, 2 chest packs. I don't think we do a backpack right now.
Probably in the works, right?
Well, we've done a backpack. Yeah, and backpacks are great angling tools, so potentially in the works.
Here's where I'm kind of going with this, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, about 4 years ago you guys introduced the packs, right? About 2015, 2016, is that right?
I'd have to check, but I think it might be a little bit longer than that, but you're right in the ballpark.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and a lot of what we did there was value-oriented, right? We saw in the marketplace that a lot of these T-zip packs were well over 200 and getting closer to 300 in some cases. And we really wanted to have something that was not only super fishy and matched our zero sweep concepts, but also affordable for the guys that are heading out there, that want that security. When you end up filing in hundreds of flies into your boxes, and I use boxes plural, so each one of those boxes has hundreds of flies. It's the most expensive thing you're carrying with you on the water, whether you realize it or not. Like, the big one-time purchase of a fly rod was, a blow to your pocketbook, but the $25 you spend every time before you go out fishing to grab a couple bugs, when you start taking inventory of most anglers' bags, it adds up to a huge line item, which is awesome, because there's always that scenario where you're out there and you're like, thank goodness I have this with me. Because that was the difference between success and walking away frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so we wanted to provide a bag to house those kind of flies for folks. We all take slips and bumps in the river, and we all fish through crazy rainstorms or have to hide out through some of them, depending on severity. But we wanted a pack that was just as hardcore as our anglers. And so we launched the Tongass with a roll top version. So we saved a lot of money there. But more importantly, what we did with the Tongass is we paired up with Trout Unlimited, and we donated a portion of each one of the sales back to the Tongass National Forest to really be able to protect those wild places that are still out there.
Awesome. You know what, Russ? What is the industry saying towards the Tongass pack? Like the fly fishers, the guys that are using it?
Oh, it's a great product. That's a great product. Our first run of them, we had a couple issues with, which obviously have been ironed out immediately, but overall, man, the Tongass, again, for a waterproof pack, what you typically find is it's a giant cavern that's sealed behind a waterproof zipper with no features you're used to in kind of your traditional cut-sew bag. And so we've done a lot of innovation on trying to build in organization and the features we're used to seeing in our non-waterproof bags. And so what I hear back from anglers, and even myself as an angler, and that's what I use when I fish, is the Tongass waist pack, is that you get a lot of those features you like out of your regular bag, and now it's waterproof, which I love. I love taking pictures. It's, like I said, I got a BFA at CU Boulder is my background, so I haven't stopped taking pictures, and for me it's great. I can carry a DSLR confidently out on the water, and for me, taking pictures is kind of that way to remember the day, and there's just so many enhancements outside of the fish. I love catching fish. It's the point of going out on the water, but if you're not looking around to enjoy everything else that exists around you, you're missing out on a big part of why we go out into the woods with a fly rod in our hand.
Well said, Russ, for sure. Well said. I also want to ask you here, You mentioned about the flies and sourcing the flies and ethical flies, and we talked about the early days of the chicken with the head cut off and all that sort of stuff. Can you tell us today where you're sourcing or how you're sourcing your flies and your materials?
Yeah. We've got a couple different factories. That's a great question. It's complex. When you're dealing with animal parts and you're trying to ship those internationally, it's insane. We've kind of got at the office
I bet.
what we call the Men in Black division, which is really our operations team.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember the movie Men in Black, right, their whole job was on a daily basis, there's some alien life threat that, threatens to wipe out the human race, and, no one needs to know about it. We've kind of got that same department operating
Mm-hmm.
within Umpqua, because on a daily basis, there's a giant shortage of this animal or that animal. And then when we do get those animals in, we have quarantine periods. And so, lead times on flies are unbelievably long. The production of them themselves is, again, it's when you can tie a copper john in a minute 10, it's fairly quick. But getting materials to where they need to be is the most complex part of the job. And when we're talking about tying hundreds of dozens of flies, you need, bulk materials in a big way. So, we've got our Men in Black division that they stay very, very busy on a daily basis, that the common angler never knows about. Even most employees at Umpqua don't know about.
Well, I don't want to throw out the words like ethical or humane or fair, but I'm sure that's a part of the driving factor that these Men in Black are definitely doing. Can you touch a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, are you referring to like working conditions or like?
With the animals.
Yeah, man, I don't know. You're killing animals to tie flies with. That's the reality. That sounds very harsh. We are participating in a blood sport where we intentionally harass animals too. To be real, a lot of what we utilize, like all the deer hair we get, that's all sourced from hunters that are out there hunting on public and private land. So we're
that's kind of what sorry to cut. That's exactly what I'm referring to. So it's a usable aspect, right? That someone has hunted, they've collected the meat for their benefits, and then you guys have taken the deer hair from there, and it's returned back. Essentially, is kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah, it's not going to waste. And the same thing holds true with like when we harvest feathers from chicken. It's not like we're just throwing a pile of chicken breasts in a compost heap.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get across, is that you guys are ethical in that response, in that sense.
Yeah, we're being very smart. We're doing the right thing. And we're trying to do, we live in a resource-dependent world. If we're not smart about the decisions we make as a company, right, that eventually affects long-term thinking, just across cultures and places. And, suddenly the world we like to go recreate in is changing quickly. Yeah, we absolutely try to think about that.
I totally agree with you. I want to ask you, you mentioned countries and different countries. You guys are a global brand, and your products in many different countries and whatnot. Is there any trends or anything that you're sensing from each country, or different demands from each country that you could share with us?
Yeah. Flies are still regional, right? We haven't lost that aspect of really fly sales. So you can look at like overall fly sales from Umpqua, and you can see regionally that certain flies of that region sell better in their home waters. That holds true whether you're talking about Atlantic salmon flies. Certainly we tie a lot of, I think one of the trends I'll call out right away before a long ramble and rant, really competition style flies, Perdigon, these slim bodied jig flies or barbless flies have become very, very popular and great sellers for us. In Europe, those have been king for a long time and known, and it's kind of taking root here in American soil. But yeah, we sell those well overseas. The other thing we sell overseas very, very well is kind of this like American Western style dry fly. Big bushy hackles, and it's not what they fish in Europe. In Europe, they're fishing very slender CDC flies, and a lot of that is due to the fish that they have, right? Grayling have very, very small mouths. Imagine kind of like our whitefish, but more selective. And so they choose CDC because what happens when CDC, they go to eat it, that CDC collapses, right? And allows that fly to get sucked into their mouth. So your hook to land ratio is better. Our Western hackled flies are not nearly as popular because those small grayling have trouble getting those into their mouth when they go to suck that fly in. That water tension's a little too much for the lady of the river. But that being said, with the trout fishing that they have over in Europe, nothing beats a hackled fly for just longevity floating through broken water.
Russ, really quickly, for those listeners that might not know, what is CDC?
It's for you guys that don't know. Look in a down comforter or down pillow or down jacket, those little pieces that puff out. That's essentially what we're talking about. CDC Col de Canard has a ton of surface area for the type of feather it is. It's very soft and webby, floats like a cork until those fibers get compressed, and then it will sink like a stone once those feathers get compressed. So you need to use the appropriate dressings or have enough of those tied where you can have fresh ones coming on to the end of your line.
Russ, earlier on in the conversation during your introduction, you were talking about new products. What's new over at Umpqua that you could share with us?
Oh, every year we come out with about 300 new flies on average. I got to sit through my first fly selection meeting, which we get submissions from some of the fishiest folks around the country.
Walk us through that. How was that?
I was a kid in a candy store. I didn't know how to restrain myself. Like these guys, the guys who are in the room are all a little bit more seasoned. They've all been there at least 5 years, so they've all sat through it. And you're pouring unbelievable, beautifully tied flies onto the table, and I thought it was like.
And these are the best of the best, right? Like these are like they're bringing you the best of the best flies, no doubt. Yep.
This is certainly the best flies that they're able to tie as well, right? And anyway, I'm married. I got married before Tinder, but I've seen it. I thought it was like fly Tinder. It was like swipe to the left for no, swipe to the right. Let's have a little bit more look. What does everyone think? It was unbelievably cool, and we get everything from steelhead flies, steelhead skaters to, Montana foam flies to Colorado tinies, to redfish flies to the next great permit crab. And you get to sit there and digest all of them. And then at a certain point, you realize that everything is really good. And you're like, all right, we can't have 600 new flies this year. We can't, you can't put them in the pipeline and think they're coming to market. And so then you have to say, like, all right, does this one make more sense for next year? Do we do this one this year? It's an unbelievably fun process.
I bet it is a long process, though, and a lot of
there's bathroom breaks involved, a lunch break.
Yeah. and I'm sure there's like a casting process involved as well, right? Like a testing.
Oh yeah. So once they get through the initial, there's a first round, right? And then there's a second round. Mm-hmm. And then there's tire follow-up. We get fly origin stories. We get to hear about kind of how it came to be, the why behind it, where it was proven, where it was tested. And so really a lot of that's why we utilize a signature tire. These guys are developing flies. This isn't like, I tied up this fly.
Fly.
Yeah. It's not like I tied up this fly on my vise and I sent it to you guys. This is like, a couple years in the making, refinement. This is color selection, material selection. And so a lot of times when we get the flies, we don't necessarily have to take them to the water. They've been on the water for 3 years, being proven in a variety of conditions.
Absolutely. Russ, you've shared a lot with us today about the company. Where do you see the company going in the next 5 years? And if you could, in the next 45 years?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, we are extremely focused on sharing our fly origin stories. They are so unique, and I have a passion for it. I don't know whether it's where I'm at in my personal angling career that the history of flies is becoming so important to me, or if it's because what I see on a daily basis on social media leaves me feeling like no one is there to let these folks know what came before them. we're in Colorado. We have a lot of people moving to this state because of the incredible outdoor recreation we have. With that, they all want to make fly fishing a part of their experience, right? And you see them go out there and they catch their first fish, and it's amazing, and they're happy to have caught anything, right? 2 years later, they're Insta famous, and they'll tell you everything you need to know about fishing in the state, with no real understanding of what was before them, the why behind what we're doing. And so really, again, like that modern history of fly fishing, I think we're very focused on sharing that. And we're going to share that through our flies and the innovation that we see, right? Like, articulated flies, right? I mean, that wasn't a thing 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Articulation on flies was kind of, again, one of those things that was behind the vest. Like, there's a story
15,
there.
Probably.
The jigged fly, right? The revolution we're seeing there. One of my team members, Lance Egan, on the U.S. national team, he's been fishing these flies from times when you can only get that shape in a hook from Europe directly. And so, he's talking about, he's going to share with us the origin story of the jig fly and how it worked into his patterns as a competitor, as also a signature tire. We've got a ton of incredible stories like that. Randall Kaufman's story of the stimulator is compelling. I would beg to argue that most anglers, especially in the West, but I would even venture into the Southeast and East Coast, have a stimulator in their box. And probably have confidence in that fly. And that was an Umpqua original and just really an original design. Anyway, that's our next 5 years, is really just is sharing a lot of the history of our sport with people, because I think we're at a time where it's important to have that grounding factor that I am not the greatest angler in the world. There were people before me that were doing this, that were driving innovation back then, and hopefully providing inspiration for the future too, right? Like for the next crop of tires and anglers, and really understand what was before them. Because if we don't understand the past, we can't judge the present on it. And we're, having moved out from the West Coast, we're challenged as anglers to have future fishing opportunities that we're as good as, right? And I think people need to remember when it was that good. And that's only done if you understand the past.
Well said. Definitely well said. I wish you guys luck in that, for sure, to educate someone. I mean, you have your work cut out for you in the education department, but I feel it's such an important necessary.
And I think, it's not like we're going to get up on a podium and tell you how great it is. We're just going to share stories. And I think that storytelling is an art into itself. And, I look at the characters that we have in our catalog, and they've got such unique, diverse stories, and the flies that are part of that story. And that's what we're going to try to tell. And it's going to be really fun. I really look forward to it. Personally getting to hear a lot of this stuff, as well as hearing feedback from the anglers. We've been doing a number of things already. Check us out on social.
Before I get into that, Russ, I want to ask you, you guys give back, and we talked about sharing, and I wanted to make sure that you guys get to share. What are some of the ways you've given back to the community, to either locally or globally, to fly fishing communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the Tongass initiative was a really big one for us. And then really,
you bet.
We've got kind of two ways. One way we do it is we do support a lot of different organizations, and whether it be for their annual banquets, whether it be for their individual chapter membership drives, or fly shop support too. And fly shops are the heart and soul of our industry. Without them, we are suffering a traumatic loss. I would encourage every listener out there to make sure that they walk into their fly shop and have intelligent conversation versus just clicking through the internet and listening to someone's authoritative voice. I can't encourage fly shop sales enough. Having worked in one, getting to work with a lot of them, like I said, they're incredibly important to the future of our sport.
I'm glad you brought that up. No, for sure. I think they need to be recognized as well.
Absolutely, man. Those guys work so hard. It's unbelievable. Having been there and now working for a manufacturer, I get to focus on one brand. A good fly shop, their marketing and sales department focuses on every brand out there. They're the most knowledgeable people in the industry. Don't let anyone else think to tell you otherwise.
Love it. You know what, Russ? I have that one question I always have to ask my guests, and I'm going to have to ask you it. And that is, what is one thing you would change within the fly fishing industry?
Oh, man, I'll share a fly shop for this one because I think it sums it up. In my opinion, Headhunters Fly Shop on the banks of the Missouri River in Craig, Montana. There is a shop there called Headhunters Fly Shop, and about 5 years ago. They had this sticker, and I bought a number of them because I thought it was so incredible. And it's the Facebook thumbs up, and it says Facebook ruined fly fishing with the big thumbs up, and then it says you like this, and that's it. I think social media has done great things, and that's the I like this part of it, and it's also been very hard on our sport. And I say hard on our sport not because it is bringing new anglers into our sport and exposing them to new angling opportunities, but it's been very hard on our sport because it's anglers operating without a compass in some ways, and it's a little bit of what I talked about before about the history, and I think that's the challenge of our sport. I think anglers need to remember that it's not about the grip and grin. If that's the focus of your day, I really truly believe you're missing out. And again, I'm not trying to talk from a pedestal position. I had to go through my own evolution as an angler. When I went through my own evolution as an angler, I did that really in the privacy of my own angling. I as a photographer, I documented a lot of it, but I didn't document myself with every fish I caught. I documented the places it took me, some of the bugs that I saw along the way, some of those really memorable fish that I never want to forget, the story about how I caught that fish. But I didn't document every fish I caught to show the angling world that I was out there doing it every day. And that's what I mean by ruined fly fishing, back to that sticker. So it's to me, social media it's a sticky point. It's interesting. It's healthy. It's not going anywhere. But it's we get to watch people grow through the sport, and like anything on social media, we essentially enter into an echo chamber, and not enough people are challenged on that platform to do the right thing, to ask questions, to be vulnerable, to learning. I feel like everyone's an expert on there, and if you're truly a student of the sport, you will quickly realize that you're never an expert because you meet someone else that far exceeds your ability or your knowledge of a certain category that you thought you were an expert on. Mm-hmm. You quickly realize that your truisms and absolutes do not apply to every situation like you've sold them as. And you quickly realize that when you think you know something, it all changes, whether it be the tackle or the flies or the evolution of it. So it's, that's my little gripe.
You bet. And you're not alone in that. I interview a lot of people, Russ, and I can tell you, this is a common trend. When I ask them that one question, it's always social media. Like lately, that's all I've been getting. And I mean, I'm doing back.
What solutions have they offered? I'm very curious.
So you're not alone in that. You know what's funny is everyone, and you're sitting there talking, and my brain's trying to think it's going, Greg, just find a solution to fix this. And they always say, if you find that solution, you'll be rich, right? To improve upon something. And it's not about being rich, but it's just this is the common trend when I ask brands such as yourself and the 3 other brands I've asked today and yesterday, and I'm going to ask two more today, right after this is done. And I guarantee they're going to say the same thing. It's just everyone's coming across with this social media aspect, whether it's the slagging of someone on social media or whether it's the like you said, the grip and grin. The grip and grin is a huge thing, and that people are missing out. So, and I don't think I have the time or the say myself, because I'm a neutral person, right? As to
no one's neutral. We're all participating, whether we realize it or not.
True. Yeah. I mean, I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong. Is kind of my standpoint. Everyone has their journey, right? And if
anyone's there to tell you right or wrong. It's inappropriate. Like I said earlier, I really believe that.
But I agree with you when you said how you pack your camera, in your hip in your back, like in your pack, and you go out and you capture those moments, and it's not about all the fish, and that is sometimes for me just driving to the destination and seeing cool things on the road. Getting there is far more exciting. And I mean, I've caught in so many fish where I don't take their picture, and that's fine with me. I don't need to take every fish's picture, as you as well, I'm sure, do the same. So
yeah, well, I would encourage listeners out there. We all want to be active. I'll say this as a brand, and work for brands. Just because you have 1,000 followers doesn't mean you're a influencer.
We'll leave it at that. How's that sound, Russ? I want to thank you today, but before you go, where can we find you at?
Oh, I don't want to leave on that note. Continue to fly fish. It's the best thing you could ever do in your life. You'll never regret spending time outside on the water. I'll leave on that note. You can
find those are some great party words.
You can find us at Umpqua Feather Merchants. You can find us at the best fly shops on the country, coast to coast and globally. But yeah, keep up with us on social media. I'll plug it. There you go. And to hear some of the great stories we're sharing.
Awesome, Russ. Again, I want to thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you very much for the time, and I appreciate it.
No worries.